The Functional Economy, The Bases of Economic Organization, by Bernard W. Dempsey, S.J. Chapter 4, The Bases of Economic Organization. The restoration of social order, according to the principles of sound philosophy, is the goal of the Church's interest in current social matters. For this reason, only natural truths and logical reasoning will be used to derive and establish the Pope's teaching on human society and its members. Where the encyclical cites passages taken from Scripture, careful examination shows that this is not done by way of proof, but rather to stress the conformity of his logical conclusions with the teaching of the Gospel. The social encyclicals. The social doctrine of the encyclicals is, of course, ultimately wholly consistent with the basic Christian doctrine of human solidarity in Christ and the precept of Christian charity combined with natural obligations of justice, which likewise furnish motives for attacking these problems. The procedure, however, remains on the level of reason. The social encyclicals as a group, therefore, deal with the whole range of human societies, family, state, church, economic associations, international society, and the rights and duties of each. We are concerned here with social doctrine as applied more specifically to economic organization in modern industrial society on a basis of natural reason. The encyclical, or circular letter, is an ancient instrument of the papacy for communication with any large segment of the Church or the world. Usually addressed to the bishops, they may be addressed to the Catholic laity of one country, or of the whole world, or to the general public. They are commonly designated by the opening words of the Latin text, or by the general subject, in the vernacular. Though an ancient device, the encyclical has enjoyed a sort of renaissance since the widespread, respectful reception of the letter of Leo XIII, Rerum Novarum, or On the Condition of Workers, May 15, 1891. Since Leo XIII alone, in his long reign, published 86 encyclical letters, of which 20 may be said to be social in the broad sense, evidently we must confine ourselves to the major items. The papal encyclicals that deal principally with social matters are Pius IX, Quanta Cura, Naturalism, Communism, and Socialism, 1864, Leo XIII, Quod Apostolici Muneris, Socialism, Communism, Nihilism, 1878, De Uternum, Origin of the Civil Power, 1881, Immortale Dei, Christian Constitution of States, 1885, Libertas, Human Liberty, 1888, Rerum Novarum, Condition of Workers, 1891, and Graves de Communi, Christian Democracy, 1901. Pius X, Singulari Quadam, Labor Organizations in Germany, 1912. Pius XI, Ubi Arcano, Peace of Christ, 1922. Quadragesimo Anno, Restoration of Social Order, 1931. Caritate Christi, Sacred Heart and World Distress, 1932. Divini Redemptoris, Atheistic Communism, 1937. Throughout most of the 19th century, the Catholic Church had little effect upon the fortunes of workers. The forces that caused the French Revolution also produced a violent wave of anti-religious feeling over the whole continent of Europe. The final suppression of the Jesuits in 1774 terminated what had been a flourishing system of colleges and universities. And throughout the earlier part of the 19th century, the Church was systematically stripped of the cultural resources that would have enabled her to influence the spread of industrialization. As it was, modern industrial society took the form the liberalist mood prescribed. In mid-century, Pius IX warned that communism, if once adopted, would utterly destroy the rights, property, and possessions of all men, and even society itself. His remarkable appraisal of the trend of the times found no receptive audience. Early efforts. During the decade 1880 to 1890, conscientious and vigorous bishops in several countries came to direct grips with specific social economic problems. Von Ketteler in Germany, Manning in England, Gibbons in the United States. All three of these were in close personal contact with Leo XIII, an extraordinary pope who, in 1891, had already reigned for 13 years but was still an energetic administrator. The effect that their consultations had and the consistency of the present Catholic social movement with its early modern sources is revealed in the following quotation from the decisive letter of Cardinal Gibbons of February 20th, 1887, addressed to the Holy See. It can hardly be doubted that, for the attainment of any public end, association, the organization of all interested, is the most efficacious means, a means altogether natural and just. This is so evident, and besides so conformable to the genius of our country, of our essentially popular social conditions, that it is unnecessary to insist upon it. If it is almost the only means to public attention, to give force to the most legitimate resistance, to add weight to the most just demands. The urgency of the mounting difficulties in their several countries led the bishops to hold consultations with the Holy See, which resulted in the encyclical of May 15, 1891, Rerum Novarum, on the condition of workers. The central ideas of the modern Catholic social movement are the dignity of the human person and the natural right of association, which carries with it the obligations of social justice. In the encyclical of 1891, at a time when socialism was first beginning to be taken seriously, the defense of human dignity largely took the form of a defense of private property. This institution was regarded not only as a necessary means for the individual to maintain and develop his own personality and the personalities of those dependent upon him, but also as a means of maintaining his independence and autonomy against the encroachment of socialistic schemes of government ownership. On the other hand, the encyclical of 1891 emphasized very strongly the inalienable right of association against the strong individualistic bias of the 19th century, which admitted of no forms of associations other than the state, and in consequence stifled the formation of labor unions. With criminal injustice, they denied the innate right of forming associations to those who needed them most. RSO 29. The Church herself had felt in some Latin countries this incipient totalitarianism very acutely in the various laws dissolving the religious orders and confiscating their property. The first effect, therefore, of the encyclical of 1891 was to give to unions the sanction of papal authority, and with this a degree of respectability that formerly they had not enjoyed. Even after the publication of the encyclical, a problem remained in Europe that greatly troubled ecclesiastical leaders, but which fortunately had no counterpart in the United States. On the European continent, many unions were under socialist inspiration, and the labor movement itself was regarded as being anti-religious. In the minds of many people, to be active in labor unions and to be a socialist were practically the same thing. This problem never existed in the United States. Before 1891, Gibbons had urged that there was no need in the United States for separate Christian unions. In Europe, however, where other conditions prevailed, independent Christian unions were judged to be necessary to offset the active socialist influence, and at times in France and Germany they became influential organizations. The encyclical of 1891 has three major divisions. First, the inadequacy of the socialist program centering around the abolition of private property, which deprives the working man of the rewards of work and thrift and deprives the family of its proper autonomy, leaving both at the mercy of the state. Secondly, although there will always be inequalities in human capacities and opportunities, class warfare is an unnatural and irrational interpretation of human society. Justice is the central virtue in the Christian approach to these problems, and justice applies to owners and workers alike. The state has a right of intervention, but the intervention can never properly be exercised for the exclusive good of any group within the state. The purpose of the state is the promotion of the common good, or is stated in the preamble to the Constitution of the United States, to provide for the general welfare. Therefore, interventions by the state must be directed not to interference with the activities of persons and families, but to the maintenance of conditions, such that persons and families can freely operate within their proper sphere. The limits must be determined by the nature of the occasion which calls for the laws of interference, the principle being this, that the law must not undertake more nor go further than is required for the remedy of the evil or the removal of the danger. CW 29. See also CW 11. More fully developed, this principle appears in the writings of Pius XI as the principle of subsidiarity. The third principal division is devoted to the role of functional associations. The right of association is a natural one, and it is the duty of the state not to abolish or substitute itself for these associations. On the contrary, it should foster and protect them, and create a social medium within which cooperation toward the common good among these associations is practical, easy, and efficient. In short, the solution of the social question lies in three nuclear principles. They are, first, the maintenance of the dignity of the individual by strenuous applications of the principles of justice, and by making the right of private property effective through widespread ownership. Second, the principle of subsidiarity, and third, the right of association. Modern accomplishments. In the encyclical of 1931, the first section is devoted to a summary of the benefits that followed the publication of Conditions of Workers and of the achievements and developments of the intervening 40 years. A compilation by Vermeersch lists 240 official acts of the papacy during this period, pertaining to labor or related matters. It includes the most important encyclicals and letters of praise and admonition concerning movements in a great variety of countries. Apart from the papacy itself, a very incomplete enumeration devoted to the various declarations, letters, speeches, sermons, and decisions by bishops all over the world takes up 700 pages. The International Union for Social Studies at Malines, the Semaine Sociale held annually in France, and the regional industrial conferences in various American dioceses are examples of the sort of popular education that resulted from the publication of the encyclical. Action Populaire in Paris served as a clearinghouse for information on the whole range of social questions, and it published a wide variety of pamphlets and more substantial studies. The Catholic Social Guild in England and the Catholic Working Man's College at Oxford, under the direction first of Charles Platter, S.J., and then of Leo O'Hay, S.J., undertook a more extensive training program for working men. Solid scientific work was also inspired. The Living Wage and Distributive Justice of Monsignor John A. Ryan of the United States are familiar examples. The supreme intellectual achievement inspired by the encyclicals, however, was the 5-volume Lehrbuch der Nationalökonomie of Henry Pesch, S.J., described by Soranyi Unger as the most comprehensive economic treatise in the German language. The leading Catholic cultural journals of the world, The Month, London, Etude, Paris, Raison et Fait, Madrid, Stimmen der Zeit, Freiburg, America, New York, and others began to carry substantial articles of constantly improving quality by writers such as Keating, Platter, Desbuquois, Robineau-Marcy, Visant, Noguer, Aspiasu, von Nell-Breuning, Grundlach, Ryan, and Huslein. The impetus and respectability given to progressive social views by the encyclical turned up in unexpected places. The efforts of the International Labor Organization and of Catholic social organizations have been made not only with a common desire to organize industrial work, but also to some extent on parallel lines. In addition, meanwhile, the achievement by and among workers' groups was due, in part at least, to the influences already mentioned. And for the same reason, the unions themselves in almost all industrial countries made notable progress. The cooperation of the Catholic Center Party and the old Social Democratic Party in Germany produced models of early social legislation, which were copied and later spread to the entire United States by American communities with a large German population, notably Wisconsin. Section 13 of the Treaty of Versailles contained statements that would never have appeared in a European public document prior to the publication of the encyclical letter on the condition of workers. Practically no progress, however, was made in the promotion of employers' associations guided by Christian principles. In evaluating this period, Pius reiterates an important thought of Leo XIII, that although many of these movements deal with desirable reforms, it is important that indiscriminate patchwork be avoided, and that genuine social policy be developed on truer lines. Social economic reform, to be productive of permanent benefits, must proceed consistently according to principle, or solutions laudable in themselves may simply generate new problems. The new economic systems. By 1931, when Pius XI judged it proper to issue another comprehensive instruction, important changes had occurred in the economic scene. Liberalistic competition had disappeared from important segments of the economy. Free competition has killed itself. Economic dictatorship has supplanted the free market. RSO 109. The failure of liberalist competition has created a new problem for the state, submerged and overwhelmed by an infinity of affairs and duties. RSO 78. Meanwhile, socialism as understood in Leo's time has split into three distinct groups. Communism, the violent section; socialism, less revolutionary but still claiming complete domination of men as instruments of the state; and a third group that has no reason to be affiliated with socialism since its demands differ little from the reformation of society on Christian principles. The strength of the Church's teaching as epitomized by Pius XI lies in the plain and simple fact that, as far as it goes, the teaching is perfectly true. The statements that it makes concerning the nature of man and the nature of man's economic activities, the relation of man to the external world of goods, and the kinds of economic organization that are wholesome and efficient for such men, these are fundamental and ancient Christian truths, upon which we can wholly rely. It is well to remember this because the basic teachings of the Church on matters of this kind are not merely the subject of opinion or choice. They are simple truth, and any economic program that is at variance with them will not work. This is the significance of a very extraordinary paragraph, RSO 46, in which Pius XI repeats with great emphasis an earlier condemnation of his own of modernism in the moral, social, and juridical order. This is an extraordinary and impressive statement because modernism is a defined and condemned heresy, one of the few that has been officially and explicitly censured by the Church in modern times. The papacy does not use such technical expressions loosely. In theology, modernism teaches, for example, that one does not believe in God because he exists, but God exists because one believes in him. Religion becomes wholly subjective without reference to external evidence. When applied to social and economic affairs, modernism is the state of mind of persons who call themselves Catholics and regard themselves as such and yet neither accept nor apply the teaching of the Church. They are exteriorly faithful to the practice of their religion, yet in the field of business and economics, of labor and industry, in the professions, trade and production, permit a deplorable cleavage in their conscience and live a life too little in conformity with the clear principles of justice and Christian charity. Such lives are a scandal to the weak, and to the malicious a pretext to discredit the Church. AC 55. This is strong language, and the point is that the teachings of the Church on social questions are not true because we accept them as palatable, but we accept them because they are true. The gravity that Pius XI attributed to this situation could hardly have been set forth more emphatically. What the Church has to say on Christian living in industrial society is important because it is true.